A $500,000 house. That is not a mansion. That is not some luxury waterfront estate in Miami. In most parts of the country right now, that is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a 2-car garage and maybe a decent backyard. And yet, when you actually run the numbers on what it takes to buy that house in 2026, the math disqualifies the vast majority of American households before they even fill out a mortgage application. Here is a number that should stop you cold. According to Realtor.com and recent affordability data, the typical American household now needs to earn roughly $109,000 to $114,000 a year just to afford the median home, not a $500 K home, the median. And the actual median household income, it is sitting somewhere around $80,000 to $85,000. That is a gap of almost $30,000. We're not talking about people being a little short. We're talking about an entire class of Americans being mathematically locked out of homeownership. And when you step up to the $500,000 price point, it gets significantly worse. So in this video, I am going to break down dollar by dollar, line by line, exactly what it actually costs to buy and maintain a $500,000 home in 2026. The down payment, the monthly mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, all of it. And then we're going to see who in this country can actually clear those bars. Because when you look at the full picture, the answer is way more disturbing than most people realize. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the sticker price and work our way into reality. Because a $500,000 house doesn't cost $500,000. It costs way more than that. First, the down payment. The traditional benchmark is 20% down. On a $500 K home, that is $100,000 in cash. Now, the median down payment in the US last year was around $67,500, or about 15% of purchase price, according to Redfin. So, let's be generous and use a couple of scenarios here. We run the numbers with 20% down and then with 10% down, because most first-time buyers aren't sitting on $100,000. Scenario 1, 20% down. You put $100,000 on the table. You are financing $400,000 at a 30-year fixed rate of about 6.3%, which is roughly where we are as of early to mid-2026 based on Bankrate and Forbes tracking. Your principal and interest payment alone comes to approximately $2,480 per month. But that is just principal and interest. That is not your actual housing cost. Not even close. Now, you layer on property taxes. The national average effective property tax rate is about 0.99%. On a $500,000 home, that is roughly $4,950 a year, or $413 a month. But if you are in New Jersey, that rate is 2.23%, so you be paying over $11,000 a year in property taxes alone. Even Texas, which everyone thinks is cheap, hits you at around 1.6%. That is $8,000 a year. Next, homeowners insurance. The national average for a policy covering around $400,000, some $500,000 in dwelling value, is now running between $2,400 and $3,000 per year. And that number has been climbing aggressively. Insurify projects the average premium will exceed $3,000 in 2026, up about 4% from last year, after already jumping 12% in 2025. We use $2,700 as a middle ground. That is $225 a month. And if you didn't put 20% down, you are paying PMI, private mortgage insurance. On a $500K home with 10% down, you are financing $450,000. PMI typically runs between 0.5% and 1.5% of the loan amount per year. Let us use 0.75% as a reasonable middle estimate. That is $3,375 a year, or $281 a month, just for the privilege of not having enough cash up front. So let us add it all up for scenario 1, 20% down, no PMI. Principal and interest, $2,480. Property taxes, $413. Homeowners insurance, $225. Your all-in monthly payment, roughly $3,118 per month. Now scenario 2, 10% down with PMI, financing $450,000. Principal and interest, $2,790. Property taxes, $413. Insurance, $225. PMI, $281. Total monthly payment, roughly $3,709 per month. And we haven't even talked about maintenance yet. Financial experts used to say budget 1% of your home's value per year for upkeep. That is $5,000 for a $500K home. But updated guidance from Angie and multiple housing analysts now suggests 2 to 3% is more realistic, especially with rising labor and materials costs. A new report from Morningstar found that 85% of homeowners faced unexpected repair costs last year. Let us be conservative and say you set aside 1.5%. That is $7,500 a year or $625 a month. So the real all-in monthly cost of owning a $500,000 home, including maintenance reserves, with 20% down, $3,743 per month. With 10% down, $4,334 per month. That is the real number. That is what nobody puts on the Zillow listing. All right, so now the question becomes, what salary does someone need to comfortably carry these costs? The standard lending guideline is the 28/36 rule. Your housing costs shouldn't exceed 28% of your gross monthly income, and your total debt, housing plus car payments, student loans, credit cards, shouldn't exceed 36%. Most lenders will stretch to 43% on the back end in some cases, but 28% on the front end is still the comfort zone. Let us use 28% as our benchmark. If your all-in housing cost is $3,118 a month, that is the 20% down scenario without maintenance. You need a gross monthly income of about $11,136 annualized. That is $133,600 per year. If we use the 10% down number of $3,709, again, no maintenance buffer, you need roughly $13,246 a month or $158,950 per year. And if you want to actually be responsible about it and include your maintenance reserve, the $3,743 figure for the 20% down scenario, you need a household income of about $160,500 per year to stay within the 28% threshold. Now, here is where this gets brutal. The median household income in the US is approximately $80,000 to $85,000, depending on which data source you use. Census data from the 2020-2024 American Community Survey puts it at $80,734. Some 2026 projections push it toward $89,000, $90,000. Let S be generous and call it $85,000. At $85,000 a year in gross income, 28% of your monthly gross is about $1,983. That is your comfortable housing budget. The $500 K house costs $3,118 minimum. You are short by over $1,100 a month. That is not a rounding error. That is a canyon. To afford this house, you need to earn roughly 60 to 90% more than what the median American household brings in. And it gets worse when you factor in existing debt. The average American car payment right now is $767 for a new car and around $510 to $537 for a used car. The average student loan balance is about $37,000 to $39,000, which, on a standard 10-year repayment plan, is roughly $400 a month. So for a typical household with one car payment and one student loan, you are looking at about $1,100 to $1,200 a month in non-housing debt before you even touch the mortgage. If your total debt load, housing plus other debts, can exceed 43% of gross income, and you already have $1,200 a month going out the door. On an $85,000 income, your total allowable debt payment is about $3,046 a month. Subtract the $1,200 in existing debts, and you are left with $1,846 for housing. The $500 K house costs $3,118. You're disqualified. The lender won't even approve the loan. The math says no. Let's flip the question. Instead of asking who is priced out, which is most people, let's figure out who actually qualifies to buy a $500,000 house with 20% down, manageable debt, and stay within responsible lending thresholds. You need a household income of approximately $130,000 to $160,000, depending on your existing debt load and the specific costs in your area. So, how many American households clear that bar? According to income distribution data, roughly 34 to 42% of US households earn over $100,000 per year. But we're not talking about $100 K. We need $130 K to $160 K. When you narrow it to households earning $150,000 or more, you are looking at roughly the top 20 to 25% of American households. That is it. About 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 households in this country can comfortably afford what is, frankly, a very average house. But even that overstates it, because earning $150,000 does mean you have $100,000 in cash lying around for a down payment. According to Axios, it took the typical US household nearly 7 years to save for a median home down payment in 2025. For a $500 K house, you need to save $100,000 for 20% down plus closing costs of 2 to 5%. That is another $10,000 to $25,000. So realistically, you need $110,000 to $125,000 in liquid cash before you even get the keys. And 57% of Americans say they reliving paycheck to paycheck, even among households earning over $100,000. About 36% report living paycheck to paycheck. These people aren't saving $100K. Many of them can't save $10K. So when you combine the income requirement and the savings requirement, the pool of Americans who can actually execute on a $500,000 home purchase shrinks dramatically. We're probably talking about 15% of households, maybe less. And remember, the median home price in Q4 2025 was $405,300. The average home sale price was $534,000. So a $500,000 house isn't some aspirational stretch goal. For a huge chunk of the country, it is the baseline, especially in any metro area with decent job prospects. Now, there is another layer to this that doesn't get enough attention: the mortgage rate lock, in effect. Between 2020 and 2022, roughly 14 million Americans locked in mortgage rates below 4%. Many got rates under 3%. These homeowners are effectively trapped, not because they can't sell, but because selling means giving up a 2.8% mortgage and taking on a 6.3% mortgage. On the same loan amount, that could mean an extra $800 to $1,200 per month, so they staying put. This is strangling supply. According to Realtor.com, S2026 forecast, the mortgage rate lock, in effect, is one of the primary reasons. Housing inventory remains far below pre-pandemic levels. Fewer existing homes on the market means less supply, which keeps prices elevated, even as demand softens from affordability exhaustion. It is a doom loop. Prices stay high because supply stays low. Supply stays low because existing owners won't sell. Existing owners won't sell because rates are too high, and new buyers can't afford the prices that result from all of the above. JP Morgan, S2026. Housing Outlook expects home prices to stall at roughly 0% growth this year. Not decline, just flatline. Morgan Stanley is slightly more optimistic, projecting rates could drop toward 5.75%, and prices might inch up modestly. But even in the best-case scenario, we're not getting 3% mortgage rates again anytime soon. The era of cheap money is over. Fannie Mae, February 2026 forecast projects rates hovering around 6% for most of 2026 and 2027. S&P Global sees them averaging 5.77% in 2026 and 5.43% in 2027. So even the optimists are telling you the most relief you're going to get is maybe half a percentage point. On a $400,000 loan, that saves you about $130 a month. It helps, but it doesn't fundamentally change the math. And this brings us to what might be the most depressing part of this whole thing: the first-time buyer. According to the National Association of Realtors, the median age of a first-time home buyer hit an all-time record of 38 to 40 years old in 2025. Think about that. 4 decades on this planet before you can buy your first house. In 1991, the median age was 28. The first-time buyer share of the market also fell to a historic low of just 21% in 2025. That means nearly 80% of home purchases are being made by repeat buyers or investors, people who already had equity, who already had wealth, who already owned assets. The ladder is being pulled up. Home ownership among people under 35 has ticked up slightly, rising to about 37.9% in late 2025 from 36.3% the year prior. But let's be real, that is still barely more than a third. And when you look at Gen Z specifically, the home ownership rate is about 27%, nearly 3 quarters of an entire generation are locked out. Now, Realtor.com, quote, report found that mortgage rates would need to fall to about 2.65%. Yes, 2.65%, to make the median priced home affordable for the median income household under traditional standards. Alternatively, median household incomes would need to rise 56% to approximately $132,000, or home prices would need to fall dramatically. None of these things are happening in 2026. The system, as it exists right now, is structurally designed to make home ownership a luxury rather than a baseline expectation. And the $500,000 house is the perfect case study. It is not a luxury home. It is a normal home that requires luxury level income to afford. Look, I'm not here to just depress you and bounce. There are some real strategies worth considering if you're trying to make this work. First, location arbitrage. The salary needed to buy a median home in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, or Detroit ranges from about $55,000 to $65,000, according to Realtor.com data. That is a fraction of what coastal markets demand. Remote work, if you still have access to it, is the single greatest housing affordability tool available to this generation. If your income is tied to a San Francisco employer, but you can live in a Cincinnati zip code, you've just hacked the entire system. Second, get aggressive about debt elimination before you buy. That $400 a month student loan payment and $700 a month car payment are killing your DTI ratio. Every dollar of monthly debt you eliminate directly increases your borrowing capacity. Driving a paid-off car isn't glamorous, but it is the single fastest way to expand what a lender will approve you for. Third, consider house hacking. Buying a duplex, living in one unit, renting the other. FHA loans allow as little as 3.5% down on owner-occupied multifamily properties. It is not for everyone, but it is one of the few remaining paths that lets you build equity without a six-figure down payment. Fourth, don't ignore the timeline. Mortgage rates are projected to drift lower, maybe toward the mid-5% range by late 2026 or 2027, according to S&P Global and Morgan Stanley forecasts. That is not transformative, but combined with continued wage growth, that has been outpacing home price appreciation recently. The affordability equation is slowly improving. Slowly. It is not a sprint. It is a long game. But here is the honest truth, and I think you deserve to hear it straight. A $500,000 house in 2026 is a top quartile purchase that requires top quartile income and above average savings discipline. For the majority of American households, we re-talking 60%, 70%, maybe more. This house is currently out of reach unless something fundamental changes in either their income, the housing market, or monetary policy. That is not pessimism. That is math. The American housing market isn't broken in some abstract, theoretical way. It is broken in a very specific, very measurable way. Incomes have grown, but home prices and interest rates have grown faster. And until that gap closes, the $500,000 house, the perfectly normal, unremarkable, average American house, is going to remain a financial milestone that most households simply can't hit. If you got something out of this breakdown, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. I put out deep dives like this every week, breaking down the numbers that actually matter for your money. No fluff, no hype, just the math. I'll see you in the next one.